Hello, welcome one and all to the 28th episode of Dylan Explains Everything. My name's Dylan. In case you couldn't tell by the title, I'm the one explaining everything, including the topic of today, factoring, because I figured some kids might need a review for school. So before I get into factoring, I need to explain something called the distributive property, which basically says if you take a number and multiply it to a few numbers that are inside parentheses being added together, it has to be multiplied to both of them. In this case, what I mean is 5 has to be multiplied by 10 and by x. And in this case, x is positive because that's a positive sign. So we get 50 plus 5x, because 5 times 10 is 50, 5 times x is 5x. Now we can undo that process, which is what factoring is. We have to find a factor that goes into both of these numbers. In this case, 5x goes into both 25x squared and 5x. 25x squared divided by 5x is equal to 5x. And 5x divided by 5x is 1. And the number we factored out was 5x. That's factored. Next up, we're going to multiply something that's in parentheses squared. So in order to do this, we take these numbers and call them a and b. And then we put them into this equation, a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. This is just an easy way of doing it quicker. I'll show why that works later. But if we're to do this, a squared would be x squared. 2ab would be 2 times x times 6. 2 times 6 is 12, so we get 12x. And b squared is 6 squared, which is 36. So that's what we get for that. Now, for when you have a minus symbol, it's the exact same, except for this becomes minus 2ab. So in this case, a squared is x squared. 2ab is the same as before, 12x, but we have to subtract that. And then 36 is the same. Now we can undo that process. So as you can see here, we've got a square number in the front and a square number at the end, because 4 squared is 16. And there's a plus symbol right here, so we can say this is probably x plus 4 squared. Now, just to double check that, we can use the same method. So a squared would be x squared. 2ab would be 2 times 4, which is 8, times x, which is just x, so we'd get 8x, and 4 squared is 16. It's the same thing. Now we're going to do something a bit trickier. We're going to multiply these two things together. Now this is going to be the long process that I mentioned up here. So in order to do this, some people like to use a method called FOIL, but here's how I was taught it. You have to multiply everything here by everything here. So what we could rewrite this as is the first number times this set of parentheses plus the second number times this set of parentheses. These are the same things, we would just be combining like terms here. Now, this allows us to do the same concept from before. X times x is x squared. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. 3 times x is 3x. And 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. Then we can combine these two since they have the same terms. So we get x squared minus 2x minus 15. So now that you understand the concept of how to do this, let's do it a bit quicker. We don't have to rewrite it out now. Now we can just say this number has to be multiplied by everything, and this number has to be multiplied by everything, which is exactly what we did before. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. 4 times x is 4x. And 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. We combine these two and get x squared plus x minus 12. Now let's do this one last time, but I'm going to show you a bit of a trick. If we have it like this to where there's no numbers in front of the x, then we don't have to worry about multiplying the x times everything because we know anything times x is just that x. So what we can say is the first thing is going to be x squared because like I said, there's no numbers in front of the x. Next up, this next thing is just going to be these two numbers added together. So this would be 11, and then we have to put the x in front of it. And the final thing is going to be these two numbers multiplied together. So that's 30. If we were to do this the long way, you'd see that this is right. X times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. 6 times x is 6x. And 6 times 5 is 30. Combine like terms and you get the same thing. Now doing that in reverse is kind of tricky. What we need to do is we need to find a pair of numbers that when multiplied gives us the third number, but when added gives us the second number. So in order to do that, we're going to look at this. What multiplies together to get 28? Well, you've got 2 and 14, 1 and 28, 4 and 7, and I'm pretty sure that's it. So what we can do is look at these and say, okay, 2 plus 14 does not give us 11. 1 plus 28 does not give us 11. 4 plus 7 does. So we know that this is our pair. Now we need to figure out the symbols. This is positive. Since we multiplied them together to get that, that means they must have been the same sign. So we know whatever these signs are, they're the same, since this is positive and we had to multiply them together to get that. Now this is negative. Since we added them together and got a negative, and we know they're the same sign, they must both be negative. So we can fill that in, and then we're done. Next up, I'm going to show you something called the difference of squares. Now this happens when we have something very similar to what was up here, but this time, one of them is a positive and one of them is a negative. So in this case, we've got x plus 5 times x minus 5. Now in order to do this, what we have to do is we have to see the first number is x. So we know the first number is x squared because these two have to multiply together. If we use the trick I showed you before, then we'd know we'd have to add these together. But 5 minus 5 is 0. So there's no middle term. We multiply these two together and we get minus 25. This works for anything like this. You just have whatever the first number is squared minus whatever the next number is squared. This is called the difference of two squares. So if we look over here, that's exactly what we have. X squared minus 36. Well, we know the first thing's x, and 36, the square root of which is 6, so we have to use 6 here. So plus 6 times minus 6. And then we're done with that. Before I move on, I should probably familiarize you with the terms that I should have brought up at the beginning. So this right here is a binomial. It has two terms that cannot be combined. This right here is a trinomial. It has three terms that cannot be combined. These are called polynomials because it's got multiple different terms that cannot be combined. This is a monomial. It's only one term and that's it. So in order to multiply these two binomials together to get a trinomial, we simply have to do what we did before. So 3x times x is 3x squared. 2 times x is 2x. 3x times 4 is 12x. And 2 times 4 is 8. And you could have swapped those around and done 3x times x, 3x times 4, but I just did them differently. It's fine, as long as you multiply this by both these and this by both these and add them all together. Then all you do is combine like terms, and you get 14x right there, and that's our answer. 3x squared plus 14x plus 8. Now we have to do the opposite of that. So when you do this, there's a few things you could do. In this case, we know that the number in front of the x squared is 2. 2 goes into both of these numbers, so we can factor that out right off the bat. This divided by 2 is just x squared, 12x divided by 2 is 6x, and 16 divided by 2 is 8. Next up, we can use our tips from before in order to factor this. So we know that 2 times 4 is 8, and 2 plus 4 is 6. So those are our two numbers. We've got 2 times x plus 4 times x plus 8. Or x plus 2, sorry. So then, that's pretty much solved. But if you just want two binomials to turn this into, we can multiply that 2 back into either one of these. So let's say we multiply it back into here. We get 2x plus 8 times x plus 2. And we could multiply it into there and get 2x plus 4 times x plus 4. Whatever we want. Now we're going to move on to a trickier one. Now I'm going to show you a tricky one that's not super tricky but still tricky. One that's tricky and super tricky. And then one way that makes that not so tricky. So let's start out with this one. In order to solve these without doing any fancy schmancy tricks, all you have to do is look at the pairs. So what multiplies to get 6? We've got 1 times 6, we've got 2 times 3, and that's it. Now what multiplies together to get 5? Well, we've just got 1 and 5. So now we have to find a pair where we take one of these numbers, multiply it with one of these numbers, and take the other two numbers and multiply them together, and then those add up to get this and multiply to get this. It's really complicated, but just hear me out, right? So if we look here, 1 times 1 is just 1. 6 times 5 is 30. 1 and 30 is 31, and this is 17. So we know it's not that, but we could have 6 times 1, which is 6, and 5 times 1, which is 5. 6 and 5 give us 11, and that's not 11, so we know that we don't use that pair. Now we look at this one. We take the 2 and we multiply it by this number. 2 times 1 is 2. And then we can take the 3, multiply it by the 5, and we get 15. 2 plus 15 is 17, so we found our two pairs and the numbers that are being multiplied together. In this case, 2 and 1, 3 and 5. I know that was a little confusing, but I'll go over it again soon, and that one will be a little more tricky, and I'll try to explain it a bit better. But now, what we have to do is just put this into the expression. These are all pluses, so we don't have to worry about signs. So, we've got our first number. Now, these are the numbers being multiplied by x's. These are the numbers that are going to be by themselves in the binomials. So, we can say one of them is x, and one of them is 5x. Now, where do we put these two numbers? Well, we know 2 is being multiplied by 1. If we were to put them in the same binomial, they're never going to be multiplied by each other. They're going to be multiplied by things over here. So to make sure that the 2 and the 1 get multiplied together, we have to put the 2 over here. And the 3 has to go over here. There is a simpler way of doing these that I'll get to when we're down here. But first I want to show you the more difficult way that some people prefer. So now we're going to do this one. This one's a bit trickier because over here the first number only had one pair of factors. Here we've got several. We've got 2 times 4 and 1 times 8. Now for this number though, we only have 3 and 1. So it's the same concept. If we take 3 and multiply it by 2, then we have to multiply 1 times 4. So 3 times 2 is 6, 1 times 4 is 4, 6 and 4 is 10. That doesn't work. Now we can also try multiplying them the other way. 3 times 4 is 12, 1 times 2 is 2, 12 and 2 gives us 14. So we know it's these two pairs without even having to go into this one. Now, what we have to do is put it together. Again, there's no negatives, so we don't have to worry about that. So we know there's going to be a 2x, because that's a 2. And this 4 means there's going to be a 4x. Now we have to figure out where to put these. Well, in our thing from before, we multiplied 3 and 4 together and 1 and 2 together. So we have to make sure that the 1 isn't on the same binomial as the 2, otherwise they're not getting multiplied together. So we have to put the 1 over there, and therefore the 3 must go over here. Now I know that seems really complicated and kind of fishy, and it seems maybe even a bit too easy for some people, but I'm going to show you a way that a lot of people prefer. This is the same problem from before. We cannot factor anything out right off the bat. I'm going to show you a better way to do this. The first thing we do is find the first number times the last number. In this case, 8 times 3, which is 24. We're going to write that off to the side to remember it. Now, we're going to pretend that this is a normal equation from before, and that this is our last number and this is our middle number. So in this case, 14 is our middle number, and 24 is our other number. So we're going to find something that multiplies to get 24 and adds to get 14. So in this case, we can look at their factors. 24 is 12 times 2. 12 times 2, those add to get 14, so we know we found the right answer. You can go through the other ones, but none of them will add to get 14. So now that we know that, we can split this 14 into two numbers. So this now can become 8x squared plus one of our numbers from before, so maybe 2x plus our other number, so 12x, and then add that to 3. We're just splitting this off into two numbers. Next up, we factor each of these parts separately like we did for this one. So right here, we look at what can go into these two numbers. In this case, 2x can go into both of those. So we get 2x times 4x plus 1. Next up, we look over here. Well, 3 can go into both of those numbers. So we do plus 3 times 4x plus 1. You'll notice that these two are the same. And like I showed earlier, we can combine these together. So we get 2x plus 3 in one set of parentheses. And in the other, we get 4x plus 1. And if we look back over here, that's exactly what we got before, so we know we did it right. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, be sure to like... I know a lot of people don't like math videos, but that's why I chose this one to be math, so that people who don't understand can get help from people who can explain it pretty well. If you do have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments below, and stay tuned for my next video, which always comes out Saturday at 10 a.m. And remember, my name's Dylan, and I explain everything.